Welcome to Am I the AH story, where OP's entitled sister-in-law, who is a cancer patient, misbehaves with OP's wife and tries to involve his psycho and violent husband in a minor argument. Seeing all this, OP threatens to call the police, which triggers a huge family drama. Let's dive into the story to see what happens next. This story was posted by snoo_61002. AITA. For threatening to call the police on my SIL? Cutting straight to the chase, my sister-in-law is dying of cancer, and she's becoming frail and sickly. She's still at a stage where she is relatively active, although for long periods of walking/standing, she does need a wheelchair. But it's not quite as simple as calling the police on her. It's quite complicated, so please do read below. My wife, who Sil has been abusive to in the past, can't stop forgiving her because she's dying. I've gotten involved when I'm present in the past, but SIL has since stopped doing it when I'm around. I refuse to leave my wife's side for some time, but of course I can't always be there. It was my SIL's son's 5th birthday on the weekend. SIL kept talking about how this is the last birthday she'll get to spend with him, and she wanted to make it really special. My wife volunteered to help SIL get the party ready. This ended up being a 16-hours day where my wife pushed my SIL around malls, bought things for the party, and then baked a huge multi-layer cake and cupcakes. When I finished work, I went over to my father-in-law's, where SIL is staying, and offered to cook a big dinner for everyone to alleviate stress and pressure. So after work, I went and cooked for 4 hours. My wife also has a condition, rheumatoid arthritis, where if she's standing for long periods of time, her feet get incredibly sore and swollen. SIL was picking fights with the whole family by the time it was dinner time. She picked a fight with her stepmother, her father, her husband, her little brother, but not me and wife yet. However, once I had cooked dinner, she refused to eat it and left to go and blow balloons up in the garage because I cooked it too late. The problem was that it was slow-cooked beef, and while they were out shopping, they only arrived back about 4 p.m. with the meat, so I put it on straight away, and dinner came out at 8 p.m. But then after finishing the balloons, to cut a long story short, SIL came and had a go at us for taking so long to cook and to bake. My wife then complained about having sore feet and needing to sit down for a break. About 15 minutes, Sil took issue with it, and Sil replied with, "Oh, you're sore? Try being me." My wife started to tear up and pressed the issue about how her feet were swollen and blue, and SIL said to her, "Stop being so damn dramatic." This was at about 10:30 p.m. Wife had been there since 7:30 a.m. when everyone else was asleep. I'd had enough, so I stood up for my wife and said, "We're only here as a favor to you. We don't have any obligation to help with your son's birthday party." She didn't like this, so she threatened to go and get her husband and make things get really ugly if I wanted to. She has bragged in the past about her husband's willingness to violence and how he is sweet until he is pushed, and then he fights to kill. The first time she threatened it, she said it and turned away, so I waved it off. She came out and had another go at my wife. I told her to back off. She tried to kick us out. I told her it's not her house, it's her father's, and my wife is his daughter too, so has every right to be there. She then said again, "Okay, you don't want to leave? Then I'll get my husband involved and things will get really messy." To which I replied, "Okay, but I'll give you the choice of response. I can either bring the dog up from downstairs, we have a very protective doggo, medium size, collie/bulldog, or I can call the police. You choose." Early on in my study, I was a doorman, so I am capable of self-protection, but I absolutely hate it. And considering their 4-year-old was in the house and still awake getting in a fight, was not on the cards, especially as it would cost me my career, as below. Another issue is that my SIL provably lies and has repeatedly lied to us all. Her family just turn a blind eye to it. I can't stress how easily and willingly she lies. For example, I overheard her trying to get her husband to become violent by saying, "The police are being called because I didn't want OP to be involved in the argument, so now he's calling the police for asking him to stay out of it." For the record, I didn't and wasn't calling the police, but I would have if her husband came out. There has been a huge blowout. I was fairly confident I had done the right thing, but now my wife's family are all saying I overreacted and that it's completely not okay for me to threaten to involve the police. They're asking how a frail, sickly 5'1" woman could possibly be enough of a threat to warrant the police, and asking what she could actually do. But they're not saying this to me, they're saying it to my wife. So I don't want anything to do with them. For context, they are immigrants on visas. A police incident would see them very likely deported. Though, to me, this just means that 𝐒 would lie as much as she possibly could to the police. I did not want to have to get violent because I don't like violence, and I'm a chaplain for our national paramedicine organization, and I'd lose my job that I've trained for the last 8 years, worked for 15 years, and have 2 more years of study to join the priesthood. I would lose all of this. Did I overreact by threatening to call the police? AITA? OP is not an AH for standing up to protect his wife from his sister-in-law's ongoing abusive behavior and the potential threat of involving her violent husband. Given the circumstances, OP is justified in threatening to call the police. So, OP is not an AH, and I would rate him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Though OP's sister-in-law is a chronic cancer patient, it doesn't mean she can do what she wants. I sympathize with her for her cancer, but her behavior cannot be justified. For this reason, I would rate her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Throwaway BC, not my main AITA for not paying my friend for festival tickets? Okay, so I'll try to be as concise as possible if my raging ADHD lets me. In September last year, my friend and I decided to purchase tickets for a 3-day music festival with camping scheduled for March 2024. The total was roughly $700 each. We're Australian. It is expensive here. I originally paid, and she sent me her half, but I had the tickets in my email. It is important to note that she lives in a different state from me, and the festival happens in my home state. I recommended she buy flights ASAP or as soon as they come up on sale, but regardless, flights from her state to mine aren't terribly expensive. You can easily get flights with luggage included for $200 return, even less on sale. In December last year, she decided to quit her well-paying job. I had always thought the job she had was terrible for her mental health, and completely supported her decision to quit. I did, however, recommend once again getting flights before she no longer had an income. Instead, she got a kitten. Anyway, fast forward to March, and the festival is fast approaching. I sent her a message a few weeks before checking on her travel plans because I needed to plan my movements. She still hadn't bought flights, and was conflicted about attending because of not being able to find suitable pet care for her kitten while away. I made recommendations for pet-sitting apps that are fully vetted, etc. But she only wanted to send her kitten to a very expensive pet kennel run by a veterinary clinic. She definitely has friends she could have asked to, but didn't. She also had not found a new job yet, and had not applied for government income assistance, as she'd not gotten around to it and was blowing through her savings. Anyway, it comes to the week of, and I've been calling her daily to see if she's made a decision, made a plan, anything. But it's only 2 days before the start of the festival that she conclusively says she won't be attending. She also specifically said, "Do you have anyone that would take my ticket?" I didn't really want to go with anyone else, as no one else in my life enjoys this genre of music. I also am not safely able to attend a 3-day festival solo due to serious medical conditions, because if there's an emergency, I need someone with me that knows what's wrong with me and what to tell medical people. Once she said she wasn't coming, I immediately listed both our tickets on the official resale website, as well as 2 other resale sites. I also had my boyfriend ask his extensive friend group if anyone would be interested in the tickets. The festival was sold out, so I was hopeful that they would be sold. But unfortunately, there were hundreds of other tickets up for sale as well. I even saw some listed for as low as $67 for a 3-day ticket. I had exactly 1 inquiry about the tickets, which led nowhere. Honestly, if we'd listed them a month or even 2 weeks before, they probably would have sold. But 2 days before just wasn't enough time. Regardless, I waited until the Thursday night before I packed my camper van and got ready for the festival, and still even left the tickets up online until we were driving to the festival on the Friday morning, just in case. I managed to convince my boyfriend to come with me, despite him disliking the genre immensely, but I didn't want to waste the tickets completely. After all, half the money spent was mine. And since I had to close my business down in January due to my medical conditions, expensive festival tickets weren't something I was willing to just throw away. So, we had a good time at the festival. My BF even managed to enjoy one of the artists' LOL. But then, after the festival was said and done, my friend asked me when I was going to pay her for the ticket. I was kinda shocked TBH. Her argument is that my BF used the ticket so either him or I should pay for it, especially as she was struggling financially at the time. My counter-argument was that she bailed at the last minute, leaving the full responsibility of trying to offload the tickets to me. I tried to sell the tickets, but they didn't sell. I also did not have a job at the time and absolutely could not afford to pay for the extra ticket. She knew it wasn't safe for me to attend alone, so she only gave me the options of either waste the money I spent or having to pay her for the ticket that she chose not to use last minute. She had said to me, "Do you have anyone that can take my ticket?" Which to me meant the ticket was on offer for anyone available to go with me. I don't believe my BF should have to pay either, as he was attending only as a favor to me. Who wants to pay $450 for a ticket to a festival of music they don't even like? I will also point out that the same thing happened in reverse in 2022. I had tickets booked to an event in her city, but I came down with COVID 2 days before and obviously couldn't go as travel restrictions were still in place. I gave her the ticket with absolutely no expectation of being reimbursed, which I think is obvious because I couldn't go. And that was due to a genuine medical reason, whereas she chose not to attend due to poor planning. She was also worried about spending money at the actual festival, but I had already planned for this and took in my own food and alcohol, and only ended up spending $27 over the 3 days. So had she bought the plane tickets in advance, it would not have been an expensive trip. Everyone I've spoken to agrees I'm in the right, but some believe I should offer her a small amount to keep the peace. I'm now on a disability pension due to the aforementioned medical conditions, and my disposable income is basically non-existent. She said that she spoke to people that believe that I should pay the full amount of the ticket, but I wonder if she actually provided the full story. She did not reply to my last 2 messages, and this has been weighing on me, so I thought I'd get the opinion of some internet strangers before I attempt to reach out again, LOL. So, tell me Reddit, AITA for not paying her for the ticket? TL. DR. Friend decided not to attend a 3-day festival last minute. I can't go solo due to medical conditions. Tried to sell tickets. They didn't sell. My boyfriend used her ticket, so both weren't wasted. She thinks I should pay for ticket. I disagree. OP is not an AH for asking for the money for the ticket that went to waste because of her friend. So, I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. On the other hand, OP's friend is an AH for poor planning and choosing not to attend the event. So, I would give her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Well Damn It Jerry. AITA for not wanting to meet up with my in-law who created a fake person to stalk me at work? Guys, can you just help me laugh this off because this is literally insane. I, 29F, my mother-in-law, 56F, and her 2 sisters, 52F and 50F, have a strange dynamic. It's too bad because I do enjoy my Mill on her own, but with her sisters, it becomes mean girls. I've watched them judge my brother-in-law's 24M girlfriend, 23F, for years relentlessly. Now I'm on the chopping block. Also, please don't drag my husband, 28M, on this. He is supportive of me while he's unraveling years of clear abuse from them. I am patient with him on navigating the realization of abuse, while he is patient with me on adjusting to their expectations. He is seriously very understanding in this, and anytime he suggests he could send a message, I tell him it's between me and them. Recently, our life has been harder, because my visa expired from a country he and I moved to together, so I'm at my family member's house while he is still abroad and completing the semester. And to preface, I knew how mean they could be to me only once I got married, ignoring me, judgment of my choices, general nosiness, and minimal assistance on everything overall. One aunt was in town last week, across the country where she lives, and far from the other sisters too, for unrelated matters. We've seen each other twice in life, once at my husband's college graduation and at my wedding. Other than that, we have no relationship other than an Instagram story comment here and there. She suggested we meet up and we did plan for it. We tried twice and she cancelled both times. By that point in my head I'm thinking, oh well, next time. Because I also was doing this against my own desires. I am sure she wanted to meet with me to get the scoop on my husband and I, or to try to convince me to move back to the US. It has been a guilt trip ever since we left, and she has a history of reveling in the fact that she knows the latest info, the 411 if you will. Anyways, she messaged me multiple times following, sometimes trying to meet up multiple times a day. On the 3rd attempt since cancellation, I told her next time she's in town would be okay for me, but she blew past this. She knew where I worked and she started to ask me when I was working so she could stop by. I told her that I am new to this job and that I would get into trouble if I interacted with friends or family on the sales floor, so it'll have to be next time in town that we see each other. The second time I tell her, not this time. This agony feels never-ending too, because she continuously extends her trip by a few days. So then a day passes. The next day my AmItheAsshole tells my husband that Aunt is so sorry not to see her. She has a gift to give her. All of a sudden, okay, LOL. The next day I get asked a question by my AmItheAsshole on a group chat my husband. What is my address is that I'm currently staying at since she wants to mail me something. My gut instinct after this week was to give a P.O. box LOL. Also, it's not my address, so really not mine to give out either. Anyways, I changed the subject, and about an hour later, I get a text from the aunt in town, in the city where you're staying, of which she remembers where my family member lives from talking to them at my wedding. Guys, where I'm staying is about an hour from where she was staying for the week. It was in that moment I knew to be on high alert at work. I was able to finish my shift with no problems, other than feeling creeped out. The next morning, I wake up to a slew of texts between my aunt-in-laws, Mill, and my husband. There are a bunch of pictures of all the things this woman did this week, on top of seeing another random family member in town. Then she mentions, "Went to your job yesterday and asked some of the gals if you were working. They said they never heard of you." Guys, my hunch was right that she showed up, but the graces of God prevented her from coming to the top floor where I worked. I responded by saying about 1,000 people worked there and I just started 2 weeks ago, so it's very likely that they didn't know me. A few chats later, the other aunt started to text, of which she hasn't commented in that chat, but 3 or 4 times total in the year, we've had this chat. "My friend has a daughter who just got a job there. She's going to be working in your department. Which name do you go by? She's going to come find you." Excuse me, so I ask, "OMG, so cool. What is her name?" She eventually gives me a name, and I run it by my manager and a co-worker with tenure, of which they've never heard of this name. My manager goes as far as to say she's never had a candidate by this name either. So, I'll ask the aunt, does she work at blank location? My company has 2 locations in town, and crickets. 24 hours later, I message, "Hey, did you find out if they work at that location? I've asked a few other co-workers, and they recognize the name. I'd love to meet her," and crickets. Nothing. Zilch. I sent that message almost 8 hours ago, LOL. The kicker in all of this is that the aunt is coming back to town in 2 weeks for an interview, because she plans on moving here WTF. So here we go again with a week of terror shortly. I'm not out of the woods yet, for potentially a long time. I've officially hidden my story from their entire family. I don't feel comfortable about them knowing what I do on a daily basis anymore. I come from a small family of literally 2 people who I'm in contact with on a daily basis, so this is jolting to me. I'm worried by them pushing me so hard throughout the week that if I give in to the aunt's demands to see me, that they will know they can control me as long as they go to the extremes with me. I'm not interested. What should I do next time she's in town? I know that I could just meet up with her. It'll only take an hour. But I'm afraid she'll continue to cancel on me just to F with me. Or worse, we would actually meet up. TLDR, my distant in-law is in town, and because I wouldn't meet up with her, she showed up at my workplace and eventually lied about someone at my job being a family friend who was coming to find me. She will be back in town in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure how to handle that. AITA? OP is not an AH for protecting her boundaries and feeling uncomfortable with her aunt-in-law's invasive behavior. Instead, OP's aunt-in-law is an AH for continuously pushing and stalking her at work, which cannot be justified at any cost. Maintaining distance from such people is necessary. As for scores, I would rate OP's aunt 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from Fun Concert 1690. AITA for wanting to potentially go no contact with my in-laws? My wife, 24F, and I, 24M, have been together for 6.5 years now, married for 1.5. We are having a disagreement on whether or not we should potentially temporarily go no contact with her parents, my in-laws, until they start acting like grown-ups. For some backstory, my wife's parents, especially her dad, have hated that we are together. I was raised in a semi-traditional household where I was taught to be a gentleman. Open doors for women, get their chair for them at dinner, etc. Her dad has always hated that I do these things, saying she doesn't need a man to do that for her. My wife, however, loves that I do it. This is just the start of the hatred for our relationship. Over the course of the next 5 years of us dating, my wife and I have heard a series of comments from her dad about how he doesn't like that we are together. Things like, "You really like this guy. Your last boyfriend was better than him. And I'm surprised you would rather date him than another woman. My wife is bi." After 3 months of this, my wife decides she was sick of the comments, and some other details I won't get into unless I have to, and moved out of her parents' house. This wasn't the best move because we were both 18 and still in high school. Both of us graduated. But I was done with my required credits and working full-time, so we got a place together and made it work. This move was followed by comments from my wife's parents about how I stole her away from them. Fast forward to our wedding, and at this point, we have still been dealing with the disapproving comments from her dad especially. In the meantime, her parents had moved to Texas. Dad is military. Her parents did not attend the wedding. Her dad ended up on deployment, and her mom wasn't willing to fly. I offered to fly to Texas and drive her mom to the wedding and back, and then fly back home to Utah after taking her back to Texas. She declined. Now, fast forward to when my wife and I had our baby. Her parents had made a trip to visit about 2 weeks before the birth, and everything was great. We had no issues with them. My wife and I both made comments after they left about how maybe they were finally done with all the childish comments. 3 weeks later, our baby was about a week old, and her parents make another trip to see the baby. Things went well for the first 2 days. Then on the 3rd day, I came home from work, and my wife and I got into a minor dispute in front of her parents. IK not great. Her dad tried to butt his nose in with one of his snide comments, so I asked him and his wife if they would step out so my wife and I could talk in private. They both ignored me. Didn't say anything at all. My wife and I moved upstairs, as we should have in the first place, and finished discussing our disagreement and came to a compromise. Then we both decided that her parents ignoring me when asked to step out was out of line since it was our house. So we went downstairs and nicely told her parents that if either of us asks them to step out, it would be appreciated if they would listen since it's our house. This turned into a huge argument between us and them, which slowly slid into them slandering our relationship/decisions, and especially slandering me. As a result, we told them to leave and go home because they weren't welcome here. They refused until they finally left our house 2 hours later. The next day, they texted my wife wanting to go and do something with us, like nothing had ever happened. We didn't know what to do and made the mistake agreeing. Shortly after, they left and headed back home. 2 months later, my in-laws texted my wife saying they had taken time off and were coming to visit again in October 2024. They didn't ask us about if the dates they were coming would work for us before taking the time off and telling us they were coming. I was irritated by this, but I caved and decided to let them come anyway because my wife talked me into it. Well, now they have showed up a day early and also informed us they are staying 2 days longer than we were told. I'm not the type to hold a grudge, but I'm already not ultra thrilled about them coming at all after the disrespect that occurred during their last trip. And now they just decided to take a trip here and extend the length of it without clearing it with us first, even though my wife and I specifically asked them to clear dates with us multiple times since we are hosting, and all 3 of the trips they've taken her weren't cleared with us beforehand. Am I the AH for wanting to put our foot down and possibly go no contact temporarily until they start respecting us and our boundaries? OP is not the AH for wanting to go no contact with his in-laws. He and his wife have repeatedly communicated their boundaries, which his in-laws have always disregarded. Their disrespectful comments and refusal to listen to requests during visits demonstrate a lack of maturity and respect for OP and his wife's relationship. In this situation, OP's response is reasonable. So, OP is not an AH. Rather, his in-laws are AHs, and I would give them a 3 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from firm_camera_5724. AITA for not wanting to talk to my friend because she woke up the whole neighborhood and my parents while she threw a drunken temper tantrum. I, 22F, have been friend with B, also 22F, since our senior year of high school. She was the new girl, and we had a few classes together. From afar, I loved how outgoing and free-spirited B was. B was everything I wanted to be during that time. I wasn't shy per se, more so a little quiet, and I really tried being focused in class, also on focus pills, aka Adderall. I was diagnosed with ADHD my freshman year of HS, so I've been on a strict plan since then, trying to focus in school. B was also diagnosed with ADHD around her sophomore year of college. I'm not sure what her plan for success was. All I know is that she just takes her pills for school and moves on with her day like normal. B and her husband moved in with me at the end of summer because she got into a fight with her husband's cousin, who was co-renting with them. They needed a place to live, so I asked my parents if it was all right, if they could take the vacant small room and pay rent. My parents said yes, and so they moved in. Everything was going fine. I laid some ground rules. For example, I know we're best friends, but from the beginning I told her I did not want to get involved in her relationship troubles, and vice versa. Can she vent? Of course. I'll give my opinion only when it's needed, but I did not want to be caught in the middle if it did happen. Well, fast forward to this Halloween weekend, we all went out. B, her husband, my husband, two of my husband's cousins, and I all went out to the city. Recently she had been fighting with her husband more often. She'd tell me she did not want her husband to go out with us. I told her maybe before going out, it would be a good idea to patch things up, or else things can get really ugly once you're drunk, and think certain things/actions are okay to do, just because you're fighting, things that are really hard to go back on, like infidelity. B understood what I was saying, but she never told me if they patched things up. All I know is that they went out with us. Everything was going fine. We went out to a club, danced a bit, moved on to the next club, and that's when everything went from great to bad. B and I had the same amount to drink. We weigh the same, and I drink less, so I thought her tolerance was higher than mine. At this point, I was so drunk. We were both in line for the bathroom. B was way closer to the front with her husband, and I was in the back. I was only there for what seemed like a minute before her husband came to the back of the line to tell me to go talk to B, saying she was kissing some other guy in front of him. I looked at him and said, no, she wasn't. He swore up, down, left, and right that she was. He looked over to where they were in line. B and the other guy left. He went to go look for them, and I started to panic a bit. I looked for my husband and told him what was going on. He started to look for his cousin. His cousin saw her walk past with another dude and left the club. He followed them just to make sure she was okay. She tried getting back inside the club, but the bouncer would not let her back in. Naturally, we all had to go out with her. I told my husband I just wanted to go home. We got an Uber, and her husband did not want to go. He was just going to let her come home with us. We told him he should sleep on the couch and go put her to bed upstairs. The whole time while we were waiting, she was slapping him, punching him, telling him what a piece of he was for letting her leave, etc. This sobered me up so quickly that now I just wanted to go back to work. She slapped him twice in the Uber, still screaming, crying, telling him that he's a bitch and she's gonna divorce him. I was making small talk with the driver, so my husband's account wouldn't get banned. He was a nice gentleman. We got home, and I thought that was the end of it. It was not. She took off her shoes and walked out the door. Now she's hysterical. She walked up the street about half a block, met a lady, and sat down with this person I've never met. They talked for 15 minutes, and I was there just to make sure she was safe. My husband came behind me to make sure we were both safe. I told her it's time to go home. She wouldn't listen. She kept screaming. She won't be leaving until her husband comes to pick her up. My husband told her it's time to go home. He's there waiting for her, and all of a sudden he started catching stray bullets. She tells him that he's also a piece of. She goes on and on saying things to him that actually indirectly hurt me. I got up, told her she can talk all the crap she wants about her husband, but she won't be disrespecting mine. We left. We got home, found B's husband in the living room, told him to go get her, and went to bed. Now, this is where I want to say the story ends. Nope. Her husband leaves, not sure where he went. She comes back and starts screaming, "Where's my husband?" She goes back out on the street. At this point, all 5 different neighbors are up and outside, asking what happened and why she's screaming bloody. My dad calls me to go get my friend because all of the neighbors are up, and so are they. Side note, it's one thing for my neighbors to get up, But when you embarrass me in front of my immigrant parents like that, who I love and respect, there's no going back from that. I go get her. I'm so livid. I tell her to shut up. She will not embarrass me like that in front of people, no matter how drunk she is. We sit her down, and she will not stop. She's screaming and crying in front of my parents. I saw their faces, and it's like my mind flipped a switch. I started to get violent. I didn't know how else to make it stop. I lunged towards her, but not before my husband began to hold me back. I started screaming, matching her tone, to tell her that she is an ungrateful. I give you a roof over your head, and this is how you treat me? That's so f***ed up, B. How could you act like this in front of my parents when all I've ever done is help you? This was something my parents have only seen once, when I'm under an unfathomable amount of stress. My husband had never seen that side of me. I was hyperventilating. My parents started to hug me. They've never hugged me like that, ever. They were saying some stuff to calm me down, but at this point, I blacked out. My parents said she got in her car and drove away. For the next few hours, she started texting my phone, saying if we didn't call her husband, she would crash her car. She texted me 4 times that night, saying she will crash her car. I stopped interacting with her. It was 2 a.m. at this point. At 5 a.m., she texted my phone to open the door. She'd found her husband and needed us to let them in. I woke up a few minutes before my alarm and went to work like normal, just with puffy red eyes. The whole night, I could not wait to get to work. I needed my routine back. My parents told me the next day that she didn't calm down until I had my panic attack. They sat B and her husband down and told them that was to never happen again. If it did, they would be evicted without notice. They also mentioned they had video recordings of everything. If her husband wanted the recordings to use against her, they were willing to give them to him. My dad, on my part, said I'm not to go out with her anymore. She said sorry, and she had her husband translate what had happened because my parents only speak Spanish. It sounded like she was blaming her ADHD for everything. She takes pills, and they might have crossed with the alcohol. Regardless, that did not excuse her actions that night. I've told her in the past she should wait for her body to get rid of her medication if she knows she's going to binge drink. B texted and apologized. She wants to talk in person. How do I tell her I don't want to be her friend anymore? She brought out a side of me I hadn't seen in a very long time. The living room triggers me. Looking at her brings me back to that moment. Every time I shut my eyes, my dreams bring me back to me almost beating the crap out of her to stop. I don't know how to proceed. My nerves have been everywhere. I almost just want to block her out of my life completely. I don't want to be friends with someone abusive, manipulative, violent, and who brings out the worst in me. Not to mention she only calmed down when I completely and utterly lost my cool. I'm not a confrontational person. Even writing about this just makes me nervous. OP is not an AH here. Rather, OP's friend is an AH, a big AH, for her disruptive and disrespectful behavior. It is reasonable for OP to want to distance herself from her friend and set boundaries. OP did nothing wrong. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and her friend 2.5 out of 5. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.